You do? Okay.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Meg. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us virtually tonight. My name is Rachel Selsky. I am here with Camoin Associates. We're working with the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation and the Bennington Regional Planning Commission, or BC, yep, Regional Commission, on updating the comprehensive economic development strategy for Southern Vermont. And this is the final of the series of public meetings that we've been holding in the region. Last week, Wednesday and Thursday, we were in Manchester, Bennington, Wilmington, Brattleboro, and Bellows Falls for a series of 1-hour public meetings. We had really great participation, and we wanted to offer one final virtual option as well. And so thank you all so much for joining us today. Our plan is just a brief welcome. I'll talk a little bit about what is a CEDS, what is a comprehensive economic development strategy, talk a little bit about what has been accomplished since the 2019 CEDS was most recently completed. We'll talk about what we've heard so far, what is informing our thoughts around the objectives and the strategies for the 2024 CEDS, and then we'll talk a bit about next steps. I'm happy to take questions or comments at any point, so feel free to unmute yourself and or raise your hand or put a chat in the chat box. Any of that would be fine. I know Meg will keep an eye on it, and I'll keep an eye on it as well. So happy to just keep this relatively informal. I did just want to call your attention to the call out box that I have here that says submit your project to the CEDS and RPP. What that is something that's relatively unique that Southern Vermont does is as they're preparing their comprehensive economic development strategy, and every year thereafter, even in between the full formal updates, they request projects from the community that people would like to see included in the overall CEDS document as important projects for implementation. So this can be a project from a municipality, a private sector business, a public sector municipality, a nonprofit organization, really anyone in the community who has a project that they see that they would like to see accomplished, and they can see it tying into the economic development goals of the community. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I wanted to kind of plant the seed early on so that as you're listening to the presentation, if you hear if you're thinking about a project that you're working on in your community that you think could tie in, I just wanted to get you thinking about that. Because really the goal here is not to just create a strategy, but to identify specific projects or investments that would have really positive outcome on the larger region's economy. So just wanted to start you thinking about that. So what is a CEDS? Stands for Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. This is a document and a tool planning process that is really quite prescribed by the Economic Development Administration. The federal EDA supports communities to complete these types of strategies, both from the county level, there's regional CEDS, so multi-county level, as well as statewide CEDS. There are all different levels of geography completing these documents. They're a really good way for communities to organize around identifying their target industries, their goals around economic development, but it's also a really strong way to connect with federal funding opportunities and list projects or infrastructure investments that you would like to see completed. If it gets into the CEDS, it just gets a little extra bonus points when submitting for funding opportunities. It was most recently completed in Southern Vermont in 2014 and then again in 2019. So Southern Vermont is on a really great every 5-year update schedule, which is really relatively unique. Many communities are updating it regularly, but the consistency with which Southern Vermont is keeping it updated is really a great thing and something you all should be very proud of. In addition, I just wanted to call out that the work that Southern Vermont is doing in implementation of the previous CEDS has been recognized by colleagues in economic development. The International Economic Development Council calls for project submissions, programs, unique marketing campaigns to be submitted each year, and then essentially peers review all the work that is done around the country and awards gold, silver, and bronze to different types of projects around the country. And work that was identified in the CEDS for Southern Vermont was awarded recently, both in 2023 for the Welcoming Workplaces program, as well as in 2024 for the Reality Fair program that was identified through the CEDS and implemented by Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. So I just think it's important to highlight the really exceptional work that is being done, and that it's being recognized by other economic developers around the country. And so I just wanted to give kudos to the CEDS committee as well as the region in terms of focusing on these economic development goals. So how has a CEDS worked for Southern Vermont? I really wanted to take a moment to highlight specific projects that have been implemented and funded after being identified in the CEDS document, really to drive home that this is not just a planning process or a chance for us to talk about what we want to see, but really it's a chance for us to document what needs to be done, what investments need to be made, what programs need to be put in place to really make a positive change and address and accomplish some of the goals around economic development and vitality. So these are some projects that have been identified and funded through identified through the CEDS program and then funded and actually implemented on. So the first one, I'll talk about the two houses that are being built. Those are in Manchester, Vermont. Those are being built because of infrastructure investment that was made as identified in the CEDS, and therefore they are able to build houses, as well as some, I believe a hotel is also being built as a result of access to this water infrastructure that was identified as a priority in the CEDS. The next one down, breaking ground related to the Putnam Block. That was a major project, a long time coming, needed a very complicated funding stack. It was identified as a priority project through the CEDS program that allowed it access to different sources of funding, allowed it to identify different collaborators, and allowed it to actually happen. And that's had a really transformative impact on downtown Bennington. The next one over is, I believe, a training program for new Americans or resettled refugees who are learning, I believe, about the healthcare industry and pathways to careers. And that was something that was identified through the CEDS as a priority project. And finally, the truck is expansion of broadband throughout Southern Vermont. Again, a major initiative identified through the CEDS process as a priority, and really strong execution and implementation throughout the region. So again, this is not just a chance to talk about what we want to see in Southern Vermont, but really to identify priorities and steps to accomplishing and making progress on addressing those priorities. So far in the planning process here for 2024 CEDS, we have done data collection and analysis. We've held focus groups. We've done stakeholder interviews. We've coordinated with the existing CEDS committee, as well as working really closely with BDCC and BCRC to understand what are the challenges and opportunities facing Southern Vermont and how should we be addressing that through the 2024 CEDS. And so through that process, we've identified a series of 9 or so topics that have risen to the top in many of the conversations that we've had as a group, as being important and impactful to economic development. So some of these are similar to 2019, but some of them have really either accelerated or changed since the previous time the CEDS was completed. The first one is about workforce. So workforce remains an issue, certainly making sure that there is adequate number of job applicants, but also are the applicants qualified? Are there job readiness skills? And is the region able to support the employers in terms of create access to workforce needs? The next one is demographics. So while there has been some slight positive change in population growth over the last 5 years, it continues to be an aging population and an older population. And so what does that mean in terms of services, in terms of the workforce, in terms of access to volunteers to be on boards and be on the fire department and all those other services that we rely on? If the population is aging, what does that mean? How is that impacting the region's economic development goals? The next is housing, the lack of affordable housing, but also just general inventory of housing. And how does that impact the ability for workforce to locate here, the ability for people to have safe and reliable homes? And how does housing impact the ability for the region to achieve economic development goals? The next one is climate change. This was certainly identified in 2019 as something that was very important, but since then there's been a series of catastrophic flooding events in southern Vermont, and it really has raised the issue to something that needs to be addressed through this planning process, and accelerated the importance of it for the region. The impact of remote work. So how has the ability for people to come and live in southern Vermont and work for companies that are outside of southern Vermont, what has the impact been of that, both positively and negatively? There's been an increase in population, but not necessarily the same increase in the labor force. How does that impact our businesses and our communities? Maybe people are, working remotely, but not necessarily connecting in with their communities or their neighborhoods. How does that impact the ability for community cohesion and resilience? The next one is in migration, both domestic and international in migration. And what are the opportunities and still needed services to address the changes associated with the in-migration? And what are the opportunities associated with economic development? The rapid pace of change, since 2019, things have just continued to move quicker and quicker. The continued adoption of AI and digitization and the use of remote workers, and just so many things have been changing so quickly since 2019, really understanding, is the region prepared to address these changes and act quick enough to stay ahead of them? The lack of commercial and industrial space is identified through this process. There are businesses in southern Vermont that are doing well. They would love to expand, but are having a hard time finding the space they need. And finally, the political disruption and divisiveness that has come, I think, really accelerated since 2019, making it challenging for any type of community conversation or decision making to be accomplished, really with constant tension, disagreements, and just the inability to make forward progress on decision making within the community. So those are the series of 9 topics that we use to inform the development of the draft strategies. And I'd love to just pause here and ask if anyone in the meeting here is surprised by any of these, or has anything that they are experiencing in their community that they would like to share with us, as it relates to economic development and community development.
So because we're a pretty small group too, you can feel free to either raise your hand or just unmute and speak away if you have anything to add.
Hi, my name is Susan All. I'm a resident in Newfane.
Great.
One of the things, I think this kind of goes along with the politics, but not really. It also kind of goes along with demographics. But one of the things I've noticed since I've lived in Vermont is the challenge of having a relatively small number of people who are participating in town government. And So if we could somehow weave that into conversations about increasing volunteerism, representation, um, town meeting is a challenge for a lot of people. And so what does our political process look like? Um, the ways that decisions get made by a very small percentage of the people who are actually um, in the town. So
Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much for that addition. Yeah, I think that's really important.
And just noting that Sue Coakley just dropped into the chat that incomes are not keeping up with inflation. And so there's there's more households that are below the median income.
Thank you. That's a good addition. The impact of that on economic development, absolutely. Great.
I'd
Yes,
also just
Christine.
chime in a little bit just around working in public housing. We find that a lot of people who are on our wait list or who we serve have been are from this area. I think there's this notion that people are moving here with low incomes, but in reality, a lot of the people that we're seeing have been here their whole lives. Maybe they've retired or they're an adult with a disability. And it's just that population is seeing fewer and fewer resources for housing. And so as people are moving in or people who have higher incomes are able to get housed, that's the demographic that we're really struggling with.
Yeah, great. Thank you. All right. Well, seeing no one else come off mute, again, feel free to chime in at any point and I'll ask for input through the rest of the presentation as well. So feel free to chime in. Great. Thank you, Sue, for kind of reiterating or dittoing the importance around housing. Thank you.
And one more thing I'll say really quickly, sorry, is also just the number of people who are retiring who have just this vast amount of knowledge. I think just in Brattleboro, in a very short period of time, our town manager left, and the police chief, the fire chief, and there are great people in those roles. My predecessor retired in 2019. So it's just such a vast amount of knowledge that we are not, we're either losing or we're not able to continue to use. And I think that can be really impactful for communities.
Yeah, that's a great point. You think about succession planning in the business realm, right? But it can also be in the public sector of making sure that institutional knowledge is there a plan in place for the next person coming up so that they can learn and be mentored. So that's a really great point. Thank you, Christine. That's great. All right, so using those informing issues and organizing them into core objectives, we've drafted these 4 objectives for 2024 CEDS. Just to set the stage, we have objectives that are kind of higher level goals. Under each objective will be a series of strategies. And then under each strategy will be a series of tactics. So at each point kind of coming down, it'll get more and more specific. Tonight, we're talking about objectives and strategies. So we just want to make sure we're on the right path in terms of the objectives and the strategies before we build out the details around the tactics. So just want to kind of set the framework in terms of how detailed we're going to get. If you have ideas about specific tactics or programs that you'd like to see, we'd love to hear them, but we won't be presenting on all of them tonight. We would be here for forever. So wanted to make sure we're getting input on the objectives and the strategies. So these are the 4 objectives. I'll read them now, but then I will go through them individually as well. So the first is address critical population needs for the future. The second is empower businesses to thrive long-term. The third is foster resilient and adaptable communities. And the fourth is promote regional economic development cooperation. Those are the 4 core objectives. So the first one around addressing critical population needs, this is both about it continuing to increase the population as well as diversifying the population to address the challenges we talked about in terms of getting enough people to participate on municipal boards or participate in local government, supporting the workforce and building out those pipelines of the workforce. But also it's about really targeting and identifying the scarcity of individuals with the skills we need in some of our core industries. So things like healthcare, education, childcare, mental health care, the construction industry and trades. And so being able to really focus on how do we attract those individuals to the region to be able to address those critical labor shortages that can impact quality of life. If we're not able to address those labor shortages, it will continue to impact quality of life. And so there are 4 strategies under this objective. The first one is invest in community assets that are attractive to young people. So this is supporting policies, programs, investments of things that are what young people are looking for when they're looking to live somewhere. So this includes housing, it includes arts and recreation and cultural opportunities. It includes childcare policies, family-friendly policies in workplaces, really establishing a community that is attractive to a young person. And young families. The second one is pursue targeted attraction for those needed skills. So those are those skills that I mentioned, really the areas and the industries where it has been exceedingly difficult to attract and retain individuals in those positions. So the healthcare field, childcare field, as well as the construction trades all of which are in critical need right now. And it's been very difficult to continue to find the needed staff. Although it's a challenge in all industries, those particular industries are at a real critical turning point. The third one is foster an increasingly diverse population. So continuing to support resettlement efforts, providing services that are needed to continuously to engage and help individuals settle in the region, as well as continuing to provide community development materials and economic development materials and business technical assistance to a wide variety of individuals who may need access to it. And then finally, strategy D, support policies that improve and strengthen the care and education system. So this is healthcare, elder care, child care, mental health care, as well as the education system. So really working to identify what is needed to modernize the system, to make sure it's creating students that are graduating with the job skills they need. What does the child care industry need in order to be successful? What are the policies that need to be in place and the programs that can help Southern Vermont as they work to address these critical care issues? So I'll take a pause here. Any questions or comments about this set of objective and strategies?
In China.
Yes, go ahead, Bruce. Anyone? Okay.
I am. Are you speaking to me?
Yes, go ahead, Bruce.
I just signed on. Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Well,
Hi, thank you for joining.
Yeah. I have to say that I did not find the objectives particularly meaningful for me. Hopefully they'll be detail expressed, but I find them to be so generic. I don't see how they can provide much direction. I mean, it's hard to think of what the opposite of these objectives would be, which is one way I sometimes object to these or judge these things. But as I say, since I just got here, I'll wait and listen a little more. There are a couple other comments I'd like to make later on, but I'm seem to have lost the bubble here with Zoom for a second. Just hang on. There
Thank you,
go.
Bruce. I'm sorry for calling you out. You came on camera and I just thought you maybe wanted to chat. Sue, would you like to say something?
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. And my voice is a little hoarse because I was busy cheering on young bike racers yesterday, and I left it all in the field. But I will try to say what I need to say is I wonder, where does workforce development live in here? Is that part of this embedded in here? But I think that's really kind of a critical thing. We talked about the generational shift that is happening. There's a lot of people who retire. We're very skilled people that we need, and there's not the real backup and next filling in behind them that we need. And it's just attracting people here, but also perhaps development here within our own population as well.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, we do have a workforce development does come up in the next objective. So there will be some more specifics or a section where those workforce related initiatives can show up. Thank you so much. Good.
I do have a couple of comments, and since the topic of workforce development has come up,
Sure.
I would like to go into one of those.
Yeah.
And that is that it seems to me that there is always a rather or that there certainly is here a limited discussion of the role public education takes in this overall strategy. As we all know, that part of the difficulty with making a meaningful plan for workforce development or other forms of education that might support an economic development strategy is that the education system is siloed unto itself and is responsible right up to the state and federal level to other masters and other objectives that really don't take into account our local development strategy or development plans at all. And I wonder if there is anything that can be done to try to more tightly integrate the work of the local supervisory union with the economic development strategy.
That's a great point. We can definitely make a note here and really try to think about the different ways to coordinate those different entities and figure out the best way for them all to be working towards, in the similar direction. I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, I would certainly like to hear from the supervisory union what they think their role could be in the development strategy, and if there are other initiatives, perhaps at the state or the federal level, that might help to break down some of these barriers between the educational hierarchy and the economic development hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. Several of the supervisory unions were interviewed, and so their information is being incorporated into this process as well. So I don't know if that helps, but that's definitely something that we can move forward in terms of implementation, making sure those important conversations are continuing to be had.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, good.
Yeah. All right, great. So I'll move on to the next objective. Feel free again to chime in. The next one is about empowering businesses to thrive long term. This one really is about helping businesses throughout their full lifespan, from idea, business startup, all the way through their needs of the business cycle, all the way to exit planning, succession planning, really thinking about, okay, so now what happens at the end, and helping businesses to be able to prepare for transitions that may be coming around increasing, e-commerce opportunities. Do they need to work on transitioning to greater use of AI? Do they need to be digitizing their approaches and their processes? Do they need to purchase new equipment in order to provide and diversify their offerings? What is it that these businesses need in order to be successful in Southern Vermont? And so the first one here is to enhance business potential for growth. This really provides a wide range of tactics underneath it that would include support for continued investment in their business, opportunities for workforce development and connection between industry and education system, internship opportunities, as well as helping businesses find other sources of funding and revenue. So really a wide range of recommendations underneath 2A. 2B is really around strengthening the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem. So helping businesses or entrepreneurs who have an idea establish themselves, identify pathways to capital, understand business planning approaches, access space, or the different types of needs they have early on in their business life. And then the third one is really around this collaborative regional workforce development system. So this is about thinking regionally to provide access between industry and employers, and so industry and education, so that what the industry needs are, what the skills are, the occupations, education system at all levels is aware of it, so that there can be cross collaboration and coordination, so that the education system is creating the certification programs, the training programs that will graduate students with the skills they need to be successful in industry. It's also about identifying internship opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities across the Southern Vermont, so that there's increased, essentially economies of scale opportunities for students as well as the businesses. So those are the 3 strategies under this objective. Any questions or comments?
So I have comments, I
Great.
think. Hang on, I'm trying to get my my video going, but here we go. Or my camera. There we
There you
go.
are.
Hello,
Hi.
everyone. Sorry
Hi.
I was late. So 2 key points I want to make here is, and it might be covered somewhere else, but
Yeah, no, it's great.
infrastructure for remote businesses, right? So like fiber.
Yeah.
So I think that's key. And the other thing too is tech schools. I think we forget, and right now we're having a crisis with trades.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if that can fall into, maybe not this slide, but I just want to throw that out there.
Great. Thank you. No, both of those are really important. Thank you so much. No, that's
You're
helpful.
welcome.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else?
I do want to just comment on,
Yeah.
we don't need to reinvent the wheel with some of this. I'm thinking about the regional workforce development system, and
Yeah.
I went to high school at a regional Voc Tech school. My sister graduated from high school with an early childhood education certification and went right into childcare. Her husband graduated with a construction trades certificate, went right into that field. There was automotive, there was business, there was healthcare. So we had people who were graduating from high school with their LNA and employed in those fields. So I think that's really important. I'm not familiar with what's already happening in our high schools around here or in adult education around here. I'm fairly new to the area, but I just wonder about, looking at models that have worked, whether they were in the past or in other regions, for some of these collaborative ways to really enhance people's sort of capacity to move right into a field, even if they don't stay there. My brother-in-law went into construction trades and worked in there for probably 15 years and then became a firefighter. That was the other thing. They had EMS services, firefighting. So ways to, create that foot in the door, so to speak, with young people, but also with people who are new to the area, people who are migrating here from other places, people who maybe are re-entering the workforce after being justice involved. I think that's a really important untapped workforce area. There's a lot of stigma, around that, but some really skilled people who want to work, who maybe have a felony and can't pass that initial job. So just looking at models that are already working in those areas and thinking creatively about how to implement them here.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think that's really important. Yes, Sue.
These are pretty solid. I think there's a flavor of it. It doesn't reflect part of our economy as well as it might, which is agricultural. As climate change comes, you see that our agricultural enterprises are struggling. Last year, a lot of people lost their apples, got through it.
Yeah.
And it's always been, and still is today, that agriculture needs to have value add processes to survive. But they also need ways to diversify and have programs and support that might themselves be entrepreneurial to support them get through hard times. Because I don't think we've seen the end of it. So I just add a flavor of climate resilience and responsiveness to this and agriculture.
Great, thank you so much. The certainly the climate resilience will come in the next objective. As it relates to agriculture, I think you'll notice that we don't call out other target industries for the region either. Really our intention here, it was purposeful, was for us to be establishing an environment in Southern Vermont that is possible for all businesses in all sectors to see success and to get what they need in order to diversify. So just like the ag industries need to be looking to diversify, so do other industries. Just as the ag industry is being impacted by climate change and the need to really build in resilience, so are other industries. And so our intention here was to focus more big picture on the overall business environment in Southern Vermont and not call out specific sectors, although they will be certainly discussed in the narrative. In the actual strategy, our intention was to design a strategy that would be able, businesses from all industries would be able to hook into and see things that would benefit them essentially in terms of business environment. Does that make sense, Sue?
Yes, that definitely does. And I figured that was the case, but I just wanted to make sure that we haven't overseen that. But I think that climate resilience theme for all business activity is a good one.
Great. Good. Yeah, and you're not the first one to bring that up, Sue. So thank you so much for bringing that to attention and so that we could have a chance to talk about that. That was great. So our next one here is foster resilient and adaptable communities. This is really covers the gamut. If you think about the first objective was really about the population, the people. The second objective was more about the businesses, the business perspective. The third objective here is more about the communities. And so we need all of these things in order to have a healthy economy and a healthy community. And so this third one is about fostering resilient and adaptable communities that are ready to deal with the challenges of today, but also tomorrow. So certainly the first one is really around infrastructure and system upgrades to reduce and mitigate climate change impacts. So identifying the areas at greatest risk for flood impacts or climate change impacts, and making sure that there is a plan in place to address them for infrastructure upgrades as needed. For are there emergency plans in place for the businesses? Do the residents know what to do? Are there things in place to make it to address any health and safety concerns for the residents and the businesses? The second one is increase housing options for all, really across the whole spectrum of from senior housing opportunities to, workforce level housing to affordable housing of all shapes and sizes and price points, to really just increase the overall inventory of housing, especially in areas of the region that are well suited for that. So areas with access to infrastructure, access to services, public transportation, no challenges associated with, natural resources, things like that. So really working to identify where in the region is most well suited for housing development and pursuing opportunities to make that happen. The third one is improve civic and community engagement. This is both around supporting municipal boards in identifying how to get greater engagement and involvement on the various boards. It's for nonprofit organizations. How can they strengthen their ability to attract and retain volunteers and be more efficient and productive with their services that they're offering? And it's also about just continuing the conversation with the larger community about what is economic development, why is it important, how does it relate to community development and housing, and how is everything intertwined, so that it's really a greater understanding of that we're all in this together and we're moving towards these larger economic development goals. And the fourth one is reinforce the region's recreation and cultural opportunities. This is really around supporting those industries across the full, all types of recreation and cultural opportunities to support those communities. This is something that's attractive to visitors as well as residents, and their ability to remain resilient in the face of climate change, offer different products and services, is really important to the community's well-being. And so that is the third objective. Any questions or comments? Yes, Karen.
Thank you, Rachel. Strategy 3B. So that's all well and good. Is there any way we can look at funding housing options? Specifically, what I'm hearing in Putney is small private developers don't have the cash on hand to develop more housing, and so their hands are tied. So can there be some funding program to support small private developers? They don't get tax credits either, like the bigger organizations.
Yeah, that is a tough market. Yeah.
And they're not going to do a mortgage rate that's like 7%, right?
Right.
So could that be part of this whole strategy?
So we can certainly look, and part of the tactic would be to identify different potential funding sources and recommend that creative solutions for those types of challenges be included in the strategy, so that if someone were to then be that type of developer and they want to access different funding sources, they would be able to tie it directly into this CEDS and say, look, this is a goal of the larger region, and it would potentially allow them to access different funding sources. But yes, certainly we can include some language about, how are we going to address all of that, those challenges that those smaller developers are facing in terms of things just not penciling out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, great suggestion. Marcella.
Oh, thank you. I saw a bunch of hands go up in front of me, so I wasn't quite prepared. So along these lines, and I just feel inspired about the community engagement piece, even though my focus in Putney has been on housing.
Yeah.
And I just want to speak from the perspective of culture. So I haven't done local organizing in my town. I've been here for 16 years, but it's just been in the last 2 years that the housing conversation has gotten me engaged locally.
Yeah.
And most of my skill set has been used organizing internationally within Indigenous communities. And one thing I think is really important about understanding about Vermont and inclusion is that people are afraid that their way of life is dying here. And there are things and reasons why tourism is the biggest amount of money that comes in through this state. And it doesn't necessarily get fostered through just trying to keep up with the cities. It gets fostered by preserving what has been Vermont's sort of attraction over the years. And so I think if we look at things from a cultural perspective and that we understand that some of the divisiveness in Vermont is coming from people losing their way of life. They don't necessarily want outsiders coming in and telling them what to do or how to do it. They want to feel like they are really being included and how this cultural regeneration happens. And it just feels important to speak that, because I actually think that there is a real unitive force that comes when we begin to root in that place that Vermont is special. We had the biggest growth of population in the 60s. Why? Because there was this desire to come back to the land and to actually, from a different orientation perhaps than the agricultural orientation, but it was a desire to create something different, to create something outside of the mainstream, to create something outside of a culture that people felt was harming them rather than feeding them. And so I just want to speak to how important it is for our engagement to come from places of unity. And I think we can do that. And when we do that, all of a sudden we have a vibe that's just so much better than the vibe that's occurring right now, where people feel marginalized and they feel like the infrastructure is not supporting their way of life. It's not supporting their values. And alongside that, I actually think that a lot of housing solutions and a lot of land-based solutions and the youth get incorporated into that, because a lot of them actually want different kind of housing. They want something that's going way further than these norms of box housing. They want to see, like, how do we live closer to the earth? How do we use resources different? And the funding models are totally prohibitive to that cultural change. So, you know, with the Far Out movie that just came out and we just filled the Latches Theater, it was packed. I just think there's something really special about how to keep fostering solutions that are really taking the heart of Vermont into consideration and moving from that place. And I'm sorry, I'm taking up a lot. I get a little wordy, but the final thing I just want to say is that the creative sector is huge in Vermont. And so when you start to look at it from this place, and then you include the other cultural expressions of our communities, instead of feeling like there's just a New York cultural expression, I'm kind of playing this up here, but you really go in other directions of cultural expression. I just think that you actually harness what we already know works for Vermont, and then you direct it in a way that has a lot of different solutions that meet the economic trade routes, almost, I want to say, that we know already work. And if we cultivate those, I just think it's a much more positive way to go. So anyway, thank you. Those are my
Thank
thoughts.
you so much. That's so thoughtful. That's great. Thank you so much for those comments. Christine.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to say, under this category specifically, it really made me think about, so we have a lot of, we have several public housing authorities in the area, and one being in Windham County, the Brattleboro Housing Authority. And I just, one thing to think about is that the building sites that we have, some of them were built in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and the HUD model doesn't have like regular upgrades where we could redevelop that specific housing site. So in order to redevelop them, we need to add housing, and it's a little bit more complicated, and there's just limited funding sources in the state. So I just thinking about where these public housings are already housing. They're already places that people have identified as what the housing sites are. And there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, but it's a little bit limited. So just in terms of the resiliency of this category, I just wanted to state that that's an area that's a little bit, I think sometimes is misunderstood, because the tax credit program is a little bit different. So just wanted to call that out.
Great. Thank you so much. That's helpful. Sue.
Thank you all for your comments. I'll just say these 4 strategies generally resonate for me, but something that's very important regionally in 3B is we talk about housing options for all incomes and ages. I think we're challenged, particularly with an aging population. The demographic is very real. And there's some housing solutions that we really can't solve in small communities entirely on our own. We don't have enough assisted living. We don't have enough memory care. We don't have enough home-based services to support people to stay at home. We're short on all those things. And, you know, maybe that's just too detailed here, but I think we really need to come together regionally to figure out how we can support those needs, maybe more than any individual community can do on their own.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I think you're, that's a really important comment about, you know, really thinking regionally about the opportunities here. Good. All right, so our last objective is promote regional economic development cooperation, recognizing that there are many organizations and entities that are working towards economic development, community development, workforce development goals, but really bringing them all together to promote cooperation, an overall shift in mindset to be really more positive about the opportunities in Southern Vermont and the ability to be creative and work together to solve the problems and the challenges, to come to some creative solutions. So the first one is create and strengthen structures to support implementation. This really, the goal of a CEDS is definitely not for it to sit on a shelf or, you know, on your computer, but rather to be implemented. And so are all the right structures in place for the implementation to occur? Are the right conversations happening? Are the right people coming together to coordinate and collaborate? And then the second one is increasing access to industrial and commercial space as an opportunity for businesses who are growing. So the implementation of the CEDS, the goal would be for businesses to be successful and be able to thrive in Southern Vermont. And so are there spaces for them to exist? And are we making sure that they are accessible and available? So that's the fourth objective. Any comments or questions on this one?
Rachel, I just wanted to just call out that Marcella just added another comment in the chat about kind of thinking about succession planning, sort of the vibe, so that with the generation gap can be challenging for bringing new people in, so that we also need to work, like if older generations don't make way for younger people's leadership, it's going to continue to be really difficult for community members to want to fill the needed civic and nonprofit positions that are necessary. So I think that's just a good comment to speak about kind of the civic engagement piece as we look at demographic shifts.
Yeah, good point. Good point. All right. Well, good. So those are the four objectives. In terms of next steps, so this is our final public meeting. From all of this great input that we've received so far, we'll continue to refine the objectives and the strategies, as well as build out all of the tactics and the full CEDS document report. That will all occur through October. And then the public comment period for the full report will be in November, when you will be able to see the full report as well as the tactics, and offer comments, public period comments. And then we will incorporate the comments, make any edits that are needed, and hopefully the goal is to submit to EDA by the end of the year. We're right on track for that. And then every year it does get monitored and updated. Progress updates are completed and submitted to the EDA each year to show what has been accomplished. And then just really briefly, the other, as I had mentioned early in the beginning of the presentation, Southern Vermont does also receive these CEDS projects to be included in the document, as well as they are requesting input on regional priority projects. So there is a informational webinar on October 1st at noon. If you go to that link down there, you can sign up for the webinar. It will be recorded as well. But what this is for community members, public sector, private sector, nonprofit organizations, really anyone who has projects that they and their organization are willing to essentially take ownership over, it's something that they're willing to, lead, they can submit it to the CEDS, and it will be included as a CEDS project. And as I mentioned, that can give you access to additional funding sources or funding streams as you're going out and looking for funding. It doesn't get you money, as being in the document doesn't get you money, but it does allow you access to be able to say, yes, my project is a regional priority. It's important to my region. Give me money, some other organization. So that's important. The other thing that is here is the regional priority projects. This is actually for projects that are a bit further along in terms of their planning. They have some of their financials ready. They maybe have engineering plans, or they're a bit further along in their planning process. These are for regional priority projects to be submitted up to the state. I believe each region, each county, I believe, can submit 10 priority projects to be submitted up to the state. So they've streamlined the process. You just use this one form, essentially this one QR code, to submit your materials to be considered for a CEDS. And if you want to opt into the regional priority project, you can opt into that. But it's to hopefully organize and simplify the process. But I would really encourage you to submit your project to be a CEDS project. It doesn't have to be that far along. It needs to be something that you're willing to take ownership over, and you can figure out how to tie it into the CEDS objectives and projects priorities. But we would encourage you to submit and attend the webinar if you have any questions. I'm sure Meg can answer questions as well, so you can reach out to her. Karen, you have a question?
I think I'm going to wait because I'll watch the recording
Of today?
Yeah, my question might get answered in that recording tomorrow.
Oh,
So,
on the October 1st recording.
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to hold off. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That was an easy
And I just wanted to say I answered a couple of questions in the chat, but project submissions are due on the 15th of this month. So we only have a short period. However, it's not a lot of detail required for the CEDS project submission. So we hope it's mostly things you have on hand. For the regional priority projects, that is a more detailed application. But again, we hope that projects will be further along. And you can, Susan asking, is there a place to see examples of the projects that are submitted? So on the SoVermont Zone .com website, we have a whole CEDS project page, and that will have a list of projects that were submitted in past years. So you can certainly access that, and or just reach out directly. There's a contact on that page. My colleague Rachel Shields Ebersole is overseeing project collection this year, so she's available.
Marcella, did you have a question?
I'm just wondering, if it's not already on the website in a clear way, could you distinguish the difference between like a local project and a regional project?
I mean, I think it's really just, one of the questions we ask in the form is like, what area is your project influencing or covering, right, or serving? So they could be, you can check one town in Windham County, one town in Bennington County, several towns in the region, but not, the whole region. So it's a matter of, like, for example, like a community center that serves maybe several towns versus a program that's primarily taking place in one community that would be frequented only by the members of that community. Does that make sense? And then regional projects might involve collaboration across several organizations or provide service for across the region, depending on what it is. So if it's and it can be a business, it can be a local project, and feel free to reach out directly if you have any questions.
Okay.
Meg, can I hop in here?
Yes, go ahead.
So, I want to make sure that we understood the question. Is this a regional, are you asking the difference between a CEDS project and a regional priority project?
Marcella, is that what you were asking?
Yeah, well, Yes, that was what I was
Okay.
asking.
I think that, yeah.
do. Yeah, I feel
Okay.
like I understand that better now. So I think it's just when you want to model something of how it can be done, there's ways then if you're coming from the grassroots model that then there can be those cross town line collaborations. So I feel served. Thank you.
Yep. Let me just offer a little bit more clarification. So SEDS projects, if you have a project that you are working on or your town is working on, and you can make a connection to our SEDS, which I have yet to see someone not be able to do that, to help move our goals and objectives along. You should submit that for inclusion in our SEDS, and that benefits you in a number of ways, including just letting us know it's out there and you're trying to do it, other funders, etc. The regional priority projects is a state of Vermont process. It has a higher level of need in terms of being ready, being shovel ready. And there are additional criteria that you need to meet. And that has a separate assessment and scoring matrix, and there are less projects. So if you submit a SEDS project, you're almost guaranteed, as long as you're the person proposing it, to have that included in our SEDS update. The regional priority projects, if you submit that, we got a lot of them last year. Those will be scored, and I believe our number, I know Adam is still on, but I think it's like 10 that the state here he is. Adam, you want to hit cleanup for us? Anything
Sure,
we
no,
missed?
you did a great job. There are 10 projects that we're allowed to include from the region. And then new this year, we're allowed to include one additional, which is a statewide project, but based in our region. So a total of 11. And to Laura's point, these are what we would call shovel ready projects that have a capital stack, engineering, permitting, ready to go, but maybe lacking one piece of that capital stack.
And possible to be in both lists.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Good. Wonderful. Any final thoughts or questions from anyone on the call here?
I'll also note that it was asked in the chat if there was a way to submit comments directly, electronically. So I dropped, take a minute before we close out and scroll up there. I dropped my email in the chat and also Rachel Selsky, so you can submit comments directly. And then once we have the public comment period available in November, of course, now my dog is going to bark, we will have a portal to submit comments in sort of an organized fashion. So once we open that public comment period and the full document is available, we'll provide an organized format. For now, if you have additional comments about these draft objectives and strategies at this level, feel free to email them in.
Very good. Well, thank you everybody so much. I really appreciate all your input and participation tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.